What's up, YouTube? Scott here with the Carrera Cafe, and today we're going to be unpacking why the 2016 Lexus LX570 has aged into its value. In 2016, when the facelift LX570 was released, there was a lot of disappointed car enthusiasts and average car people as well. At this time, other luxury brands were really innovating in the luxury SUV space. Lighter chassis, more power, more torque, more safety features and modern conveniences. Yet Lexus decided to double down and continue to use the legacy LC200 Land Cruiser chassis. And at the time, it seemed kind of like a money grab, right? Let's see if we can get the silly Americans to keep buying rebranded vehicles. When in reality, it's starting to make a lot more sense 10 years later. So today, we're going to get into why. Now, I want to start with styling because that is one of the major differences with the facelifted generation of the LX570 starting in 2016. Although the underbody is arguably a 10-year-old plus vehicle at this point, the visual things that Lexus did have proven to make it relevant still, okay? And I want to give you some examples. So, in 2016, Lexus switched the LX to kind of this triple beam style headlight and this spindle hourglass grille that Lexus has continued to use on the majority of their vehicles today. What that means for folks like myself, I'm driving a 10-year-old Lexus at this point, but to the untrained eye, it blends in with a lot of these newer, more modern vehicles. I urge you to go out and look at some other vehicles that were being produced in 2016. This headlight design and grille design, some people didn't love how big this was, but I think the lines and the overall shape are very appealing, and the lighting technology here is going to make this vehicle not seem out of place for probably another 10 years. Now, that styling story does continue to the rear as well. Again, there's some pretty hard lines back here. I've always been a fan of the look, but particularly the taillight. Of course, during the day, it doesn't show a lot of its elements, but it kind of has this cool dot matrix setup in addition to what we now see the Lexus L lights on a lot of newer vehicles from a branding perspective in Lexus's lineup. I encourage you to look at some other taillights from 2016. Take a look at a 2016 Yukon Denali. Not that great looking of a taillight. Take a look at a 2016 Land Rover Range Rover Autobiography. A little bit more innovative, but again, nothing crazy. And Lexus did a pretty good job at providing a modern looking experience on top of this 10-year-old chassis. And going along with the modern refreshes to the exterior, that theme continues over to the interior. There's a lot of really good looking lines and curves in here and materials. It's hard to believe that this is still really the same core as the prior generation. If you go look at a 2008 LX, you'd be quite a bit surprised at how different the interior is. You can actually say that about the Land Cruiser as well, even in this same year. If you were to go look at the inside of this 2016 LX and compare it to the inside of a 2016 Land Cruiser, you'd be surprised at how much more modern this looks in here. So let's talk about some of the things that looked dated but aged perfectly 10 years later on the LX570. Starting with the most obvious, modern cars at this point have pivoted to smaller displacement and some type of forced induction or hybrid system for obvious better fuel economy, power, and torque. However, that leaves a lot to be desired in terms of reliability after 100,000, 200,000 miles. The 5.7 liter V8 in the LX back in 2016 was viewed as making average power and abysmal fuel economy when you compared it to other SUVs at the time that were producing 500 horsepower, yet getting better fuel economy. Fast forward to today though, however, and a lot of those same vehicles that had improved fuel economy and better performance suffer from reliability issues. They're just more expensive to keep on the road. The 5.7 liter naturally aspirated V8 in this LX570 is frequently seen with 2, 3, 4, 500,000 miles with just regular maintenance and upkeep being performed. At the time, it seemed like Lexus is being cheap and saying, hey, how can we get more out of this powertrain that we already have? Fast forward to today, and it almost seems like they knew a little bit of their target market, and that people that buy Lexuses, a lot of them keep them for a long time, and they value not just quality, but they value long-term reliability. So the V8 has aged very well in this vehicle and now makes it a good choice for somebody who's looking at a used SUV. The other item, again, at the time that seemed like Lexus was falling short or failing to innovate is the transmission. The LX570 features a traditional automatic. It's not fast, it's not flashy, it has a regular gear selector, but what it is durable. You can tow with it. It's proven to last hundreds of thousands of miles with very little upkeep, and it still has this mechanical gear selector. So many brands now have pivoted to some type of double clutch transmission, which then obviously poses towing issues in exchange for faster shifting, or these electronic gear selectors that can be a bit of a question mark when it comes to long-term reliability. Maybe the battery's dead and you got to know whatever the tricks are to get your car in neutral to push it on a trailer. The other day I was out for lunch and there was a brand new EV Challenger. So Dodge, they made an electric EV Challenger, and this guy was stuck in the intersection. It was like a kid, probably 18, 19, 20. His vehicle was stuck. He could not move it. Well, he didn't know that you could rip out the center cup holder and there was a latch or lever we could pull to get the car in neutral, and I helped him do that and push it off the road. Just something that's overly complicated and unnecessary, right? If I needed to push this vehicle, I can put this thing in neutral whether it's got a good battery or mechanically running or not, right? And it's just one of those areas where I'm not so certain we needed to innovate. The other item is the suspension. So this vehicle features AHC, which is a hydraulic suspension, and it was also used in prior Toyota and Lexus SUVs. But at the time, so many brands were switching to adaptive suspension using air. They offered more robust, varying levels of comfort versus stiffness. However, fast forward to now, the AHC, the hydraulic suspension on this vehicle, has proven to be easier to work on and less prone to failure. We've all driven by a used car dealership and seen a Lincoln Navigator or a Range Rover that's practically sitting on the ground because its air suspension is slowly leaking. And of course, once you fire it up, it raises, but it shouldn't be losing air, you wouldn't think. So the suspension, again, felt dated at the time, but now has aged pretty well. There is still some adjustability in here. You've got a dial where you can adjust it from comfort, normal, sport, and sport plus. One of my qualms with this vehicle in particular, though, if I could have the perfect LX, I'm glad they gave us this dynamic, drive modes, you could call it. However, it's all or nothing. If you go from comfort to sport plus, everything changes: throttle, steering, and suspension. And if you've ever been in one of these in Sport or Sport Plus, it's like a bouncy pickup truck. I don't think anybody drives around in that driving mode. However, I like the steering and throttle response in Sport Plus. If I could have a perfect LX, I would have allowed the stiffer steering with the softer suspension, because I find myself frequently correcting on the highway in the comfort and normal settings because there's just more play in the steering. But again, it's something I can look past because it does so many other things great. Let's talk about value and cost of ownership, because again, when this vehicle came out, it had a $100,000 price tag, roughly, depending on options. And if you compared that to other luxury vehicles at the time, you were getting worse fuel economy, less power, less tech, less safety for the same price as some of these other modern luxury brands. Again, though, fast forward 10 years to today, the majority of these pre-owned LXs, like mine for example, are still worth about 50 to 60% of their original value at the time of me making this video. So someone paid about $100,000 for my LX back in 2016. On the used market, it's still bringing high 40s, low 50s, depending on miles. So over 10 years, it lost about 5% of its value per year. If you compare that to something like a BMW X7 or a full-size Range Rover that was produced at this same time, both of those vehicles cost slightly more when new, and both of those vehicles have depreciated almost 75 to 80% depending on mileage. So from a long-term value perspective, you can definitely see it. If you went up to a non-car person and said, hey, I just bought a 10-year-old SUV with 80,000 miles and I paid 50 grand for it, they're gonna look at you like you're insane. But what they don't know is that brand new Kia that they just bought for 50 grand isn't going to last 10 years without significant maintenance or repairs, right? So value makes a lot of sense now, and it didn't necessarily when it came out. The other item that aged very well was the selection of what to add technology to in this vehicle and what to leave as is. Again, in 2016, a lot of manufacturers had pivoted to full digital gauge clusters, right? This vehicle has a pretty basic screen in the middle that is configurable, but in no way is anything that I do in this thing really dependent on that screen. It has analog gauges for temperature, oil pressure, speed, fuel, battery, RPM, and that's the way it should be. But at the time, that was perceived yet again, Lexus not innovating. Well, long term, what happens when your digital gauge cluster doesn't come on? Or it starts to, the screen begins to fade, or maybe you get lines in it. It's just an example of where, was that level of innovation really necessary, right? You could say that about the controls in this vehicle as well. I think this generation LX probably has one of the best looking and functioning center stacks. And what I mean by that is, at first glance, these buttons look like they might be haptic. They look like they might be a screen disguised as a button, when in reality, these are all physical buttons for both climate and radio, yet they're just an illuminated kind of cutout. There's a light behind it. It's not a screen. Yet, so it's giving you this kind of modern-ish feel, so it doesn't seem out of place when compared to these other vehicles, but it's never a situation where the screen's gonna fail and I can no longer adjust climate or have a slider. I hate that so many manufacturers have gone away from volume knobs and physical climate buttons. I want to get in and turn a knob. I want to push a button. I do not want to navigate through menus to make these adjustments. Lexus did a really good job at finding a blend of, let's make it look modern, but let's not be silly here. Let's not take away the fact that it needs to be a button. We don't need to overcomplicate it. The other item that Lexus, I still think, did a pretty good job is the infotainment screen. So this is a 2016. My wife has a 2021 GX, and my screen in my LX is actually a lot larger and higher resolution than her GX, even though it's 5 years older. So Lexus did innovate here from a screen perspective. Now, it's not a touch screen, and Lexus has this silly joystick down here for controlling it, but I don't touch this joystick. I can operate nearly everything in this vehicle, if not everything, without using that joystick. I don't care that it's not a touch screen. The maps look modern enough. It's got Bluetooth. You can add CarPlay to these. Later models got wireless chargers. It's not the greatest looking, but it is new enough to, again, not feel out of place. And over time, if this screen begins to have issues, it's not going to really impact my day-to-day driving experience. Because even all of the controls that pertain to driveline, they're still mechanical buttons, which is perfect. So that's one of the other things that is really great about this vehicle is it still uses that legacy LC200 Land Cruiser chassis. You'd be surprised to find that a lot of modern SUVs that kind of tote off-road performance are really still unibody. This is a body-on-frame pickup truck-like architecture, and it has things like a locking differential, downhill descent. You can lock the inner wheel when turning for a sharper turn radius. You've got low range. You've got adjustable suspension. This thing is very capable off-road, yet pretty well put together on-road. It's swayier and kind of softer than a lot of modern SUVs, but because of that, you get that off-road capability. Any of those SUVs that have these really good performance on-road mannerisms, they might look off-road capable, but once you actually get out there, they're gonna lack the articulation and the stiffness that you need for some of the off-roading. So all in all, this LX570 for me has curbed some of my revolving door when it comes to my inventory in my garage. Over the last 15 years, I've owned about 40 vehicles, and everything I've bought, I've always found a reason to sell it. Maybe it's depreciating too much, maybe I don't like some of the tech, maybe I'm just bored of it. This Lexus has taught me to slow down because so much of the new crap coming out, I just don't enjoy. It's planned obsolescence. It's by the time your car note or your lease is up, it's going to be out of warranty and the technology is questionable. And is it going to be a vehicle you could drive long term? This LX for me is kind of like the ultimate end all be all daily driver. If the world was ending and I could have one vehicle, assuming I can still get gas, this is the one I would take. This thing will rust and the leather will fall apart before it really breaks mechanically in a big way. And you just can't say that about a lot of modern vehicles anymore. And then combine that with the value aspect, right? I've had this for about a year now, and I could sell it for exactly what I paid for it. And you can't say that about a lot of other luxury SUVs. So there's just so many great things in here. And I would encourage somebody who's maybe going to go out and buy an SUV, maybe a brand new one, take a step back and consider what you're looking for. If you're somebody who's always leasing every 3 years and that's just your thing, by all means, this isn't for you. You would nitpick this thing apart. But if you truly are somebody who buys a vehicle every 7 to 10 years or longer, this is something that you can rely on and have in your garage. It never dictates what my day is or isn't going to be. It's capable off-road, it's reliable, rain, sleet, snow, sunshine, doesn't matter. I can pick up 7 people, I can tow with it. It does everything that I would want in a daily driver, besides put a smile on your face. It is not exciting to drive. I have never really found a vehicle that is truly exciting and ticks all those other boxes whilst being a reliable and financially good purchase. That's kind of one of the reasons I've always waffled back and forth. I go from a performance SUV to a daily driver SUV, and I've kind of just given up on that dream. I know they exist, but they're also typically not reliable. The closest thing that I've had to both was that Porsche Cayenne GTS, which I could argue is reliable from a big picture perspective, but it's still going to have its small electronic issues. So with that, thank you again, guys, for coming along for the ride. I do plan to do some more to this Lexus. I'd like to get some type of roof rack. I am going to do a different set of tires, probably some KO3s, I think, maybe KO2s. The tires that are on here now, although have plenty of tread, they are older and they're starting to cup. They're becoming difficult to keep balanced. So I'm going to put a new set of tires on here. and then let me know if there's anything else from an off-road perspective that you guys would like to see. So if you enjoy content like this, please like, subscribe, comment, and I look forward to bringing you guys more.